In this video, we're going to answer the question, should you expertise Sargon the Great? We'll go over his best pairings, talk a little bit about how his odd debuff actually works, and ultimately answer the question, is this the right commander for you to invest your sculptures in? Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and the way that Sargon's skills worked were not exactly obvious. So as soon as we got our hands on him, we started to test. And even though I'm traveling a little bit for the holidays, we've been streaming over the last couple days trying to figure out which pairings are the best and is he actually worth investing in. So in this video, I want to do a couple things. I want to summarize some of the ways that we've figured out that Sargon's skills actually work. Then I'm going to talk about whether or not you, for your account, should go and invest in Sargon. Which commanders do you have or not have? Which pairings do you have or not have to figure out if he's right for you? And at the end, I'll give you some talents because obviously if you're going to use them in the field, you got to have a great build. The thing we obviously need to talk about here is the second skill, which is applying the odd debuff. Now, I'm not going to read all of his skills. I'm going to assume that you've done that, but the odd debuff is a stacking ability, making your target take 3% more skill damage and an upwards of 30% more skill damage. This is the thing that makes Sargon powerful, but unlike other commanders that have a debuff that's really simple, okay, it just applies and it's all there, like Boudica does a 30% skill damage taken debuff, it's on her active skill. Sargon does it in this way that is stacking whenever you do skill damage to the target. And the form of skill damage that gets these stacks was not exactly obvious. You would think that Freddy would apply stacks of odd. Nope, doesn't work that way. You would think that even Skippy's damage over time would apply stacks of odd. Nope, doesn't work that way. But you might not have expected that Guan Yu, when he does extra damage on his fourth skill, believe it or not, there's actually you can actually apply a stack of odd from this. That actually works. We tested it, confirmed, this works. So it's not exactly clear all of the ways yet in which this odd effect will apply. And maybe that will be a separate video that I can make. But we did figure out that if you pair Sargon with a commander that does area of effect damage, then guess what? That commander's area of effect damage that you paired him with will apply stacks of odd, making those targets take more skill damage, which means in a big arc fight or if everybody around you is using this debuff, you're going to start to stack this up in a way that's really powerful. Yes, as I'm editing this video, I realize now there is one other thing I didn't talk about that we need to discuss, which is, should you just unlock and max the first 3 skills on Sargon and not get this fourth skill, which is going to remove the odd debuff from the enemy and give you a shield and do damage to the enemy? Can you just ignore getting the expertise skill on this commander? And I really feel like this is a commander that you need to move all in on if you're going to work on him. I think you got to go for the expertise. Unlike William, who gives the majority of what he's going to do, I don't really think you're getting the majority of what Sargon's doing. In fact, I think every single way you can get more odd stacks onto an enemy is very critical. So I do not recommend going 5-5, 5-0. That said, I haven't tested it. I haven't seen the test results. So until I've seen them, I can't say it definitively. But from what I've seen so far, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you have done that testing, definitely let me know. I would like to see how a 5-5 Sargon is performing. Now, there are some really big flaws with Sargon that I feel like we have to cover that are being overlooked in the face of the really incredible test results that we got using Sargon. And the thing that we need to remember is that Sargon's active skill applies over the course of 5 seconds. He is buffing himself so that for each second, if you hit something, you do 500 damage factor, which is fine right until your target walks away from you. So I'm going to show you some test results. It's just a sampling of all the testing we did in a bunch of live streams, and I'll have those live streams either in a card up in the top or in the end screen, so you can see the whole stream, because I think it will be really insightful for you. But no real-world fighting situation is going to actually be like the 1v1 testing that we did. Now, those were full gear tests, and I'll show you them again in just a second. But I want to remind you that what you will see in a 1v1 test is the best you could possibly expect compared to an open field situation where, honestly, targets will try to get away from you. You're not going to get clean applications of either the active skill or the stacks of odd, and those are very important. So now that I've teased these battle reports, I do want to pull up some amount of these reports that I've pulled in on my favorites, and I will cut to the chase for you and tell you which pairings were actually the very best. We did a bunch of this testing in Ark of Osiris. We wanted to figure out which commanders would be the best to pair with Sargon. The answer for you, by the way, is Skippy Prime and CJ, and those were better by a long shot. Now, we didn't actually have a commander that I would have really liked to have been able to test with, and that would be Honda Tadakatsu. But we were testing with Iriston, who maxed him the very night that Sargon came into the game. And the first round of testing we did was with all the gear on Sargon, and we tried a bunch of different secondaries. Iris would say that he is an infantry purist, and man, look at this result. Sargon with Skippy against Boudica with Artemisia. These are geared commanders on both sides, and what an incredible result here. Now, my gear is not exactly perfect for my archers that I was using for this testing, but it was pretty good, and these results were really, really impressive, which led us to believe, by the way, that the Sargon CJ and the Sargon Skippy are almost certainly the way to go. Now, this Guan is wearing gear, but it's not iconic gear. It's the full infantry set. So, if you saw that report floating around in screenshots, there's a little context that you need that wasn't there. The Skippy, in this case, is wearing my full infantry crit, best in the game iconic gear. And I know Skippy Herald is not the best combo, but, I mean, it is just getting pretty wrecked here in these trades. So that's what we found, that those combos were the best. And by the way, if I show you just a snippet of the testing we did later with Guan and also Sargon, we were very surprised to not be able to replicate the quality of 1v1 that we got with Skippy, that we got with CJ. Now, it's not too surprising in some ways, because Skippy and CJ are just really good in a 1v1 situation. Skippy's just insane, and CJ is designed to take 1v1s. That's what he does. When your target is getting weak, below 30%, you get extra skill damage. So you don't get that all the time when you're fighting in the open field. But obviously, in a 1v1 situation where you run it down, that is something you're going to get the benefit of. So when we ran that Guan primary, we just really were shockingly not as impressed with the results. But great news, that's going to make the pairings a lot easier to sort out, okay? So this is just a snippet of some of the results that took place. You can watch them unfold in those live streams that I was describing earlier. Let me show you a separate series of views to help you figure out now, should I invest in Sargon? The view that you're looking at here was created in Tier Maker, and this is something that I notice OmniArc uses a lot and is really helpful for visualizing what it is that we're talking about with commanders. So a big shout out to OmniArc for using these tier lists and also plugging all the commanders in there so that I can just modify this a little bit and use it for a video that I'm making. What I've prepared for you here is very simple. What are the commanders that are higher priority than Sargon? What are the commanders that are either equal or like debatable as to which one you do and is higher priority, and like you just sort of customize for your account and what it needs? And which ones are definitely lower priority? And this is all just my opinion, okay? It's my opinion. You can do whatever you want to do for your account, but what I would recommend is higher priority than Sargon would be Nevsky. Higher priority than Sargon would include a commander like Skippy Prime, who's right over here. Higher priority is probably going to be Guan Yu. We'll move him over as well. Also, we've got to put Boudica Prime up there. Boudica Prime has an amazing debuff, and I'm going to move William up there as well. William is freaking outstanding. And I'm also going to put Joan Prime, if I can find her in this list, as a higher priority commander. Now, you could debate if Guan is equal or maybe higher priority, but I think he's probably higher priority. And I would order them maybe more like this. Maybe just for pure open field. Something like this. It's close enough. It's good enough. People will move those around in their priority. Let's not look into that too much. These are all commanders that I think are solidly higher priority. So if you need to make a cavalry march and you haven't done Nevsky and you haven't done Joan, I don't think you should be looking at Sargon right now. So I hope that really helps make this a little bit easier for you. Now, I think commanders that are maybe equal or debatable priority would be Alexander the Great. Those debuffs are really good, okay? And the shielding is really good. A commander that I think you could look at and say it's just like really solidly lower priority would be Leonidas. Leonidas doesn't have a debuff. He's just a stat stick, okay? And he's doing a little bit of rage buffing, but no, I think you're really much more interested in Sargon with the big debuff than Leonidas. Another commander that I think is just lower priority would be CJ. He doesn't have any debuffs. He doesn't have any crazy buffs. He's just doing open fielding. Certainly Pakal I would put at lower priority. For those of you interested in like what other infantry should be looking at here, I would put Harold as definitely lower priority. I'm not going to do every commander in the game, but my goal here was just to give you a sense of some things that are like higher priority for sure, and things that are lower priority. And equal or debatable, I mean, Alexander the Great's really good. Now, if you're already in Season of Conquest, do I think you should be putting sculptures in Alexander the Great if you haven't started that project? I feel like there's plenty of other things to do, and you probably should be looking to newer commanders that get released in the game. But this video is not really about Alexander the Great. It's about Sargon. And one huge consideration, if you're deciding, hey, should I invest in Sargon or not, is how many infantry pairs you're using. So let me show you another view that should really help. The view we're going to look at here is an explanation of where you would put Sargon in your lineup, depending on how many sets of infantry equipment you have. Remember, armaments and formations are coming into the game soon too, so it's even more important when you think about a commander to think about these sets of equipment that you have, and eventually it will be the armaments that you have as well. You've got to build around the number of marches you can do for each troop type. So, if you already have, oh, Richard I, get out of here, dude. If you already have Guan Yu and Skippy, which is the one best infantry pair I recommend, and you only have one set of infantry equipment, I don't think you should do Sargon. Who are you going to take out for Sargon? Is it Guan? I mean, maybe, but probably not. So I think if you have Guan Skippy, you're good to go. I don't think you need to do Sargon. If you had Guan CJ, you're good to go. I don't think you need to do Sargon. You could do him, because technically, the debuff from Sargon, I actually kind of like more than just CJ's very plain kit. But CJ's a great commander, okay? For the open field specifically. If you already have Guan Alex, I don't think you need to do Sargon. I think you're already in a good spot with your one infantry march, and you could consider looking at other parts of your roster that might be weaker, because what you have there is already very good. So if you have only one infantry march, you probably aren't doing Sargon, especially if you've already filled that march out with good commanders. And if you haven't already filled out that march with good commanders, I'm not necessarily convinced that Sargon is one of the commanders that should be in that one very best pair. Not yet, and I feel like I would need to do more testing and have more experience with him in the field to really say, yeah, he's the one, at least for now. Now, when it comes to having two pairs of infantry commanders, if you had something like this, Guan Alex and Skippy Honda, or something like this, Guan Alex and Skippy CJ, this, I think, is a case where you could probably bring in Sargon if you wanted to. But you don't need to, because I would say Guan and Alex and Skippy and CJ, that's actually really good. Those are some really good pairs. In fact, maybe a more likely pair that people will be considering is something that looks closer to this. You've got Guan and Leo, and you've got Skippy and Alex. Now, here is a good indication. If you've got two pairs, and you've got something really good like this already, you might say, hey, you know what? I want to take out the Leonidas, and I want to bring in the Sargon, and I would actually change things around and make your two pairs look like that. Guan Alex, Skippy Sargon. That, to me, feels like the best two pairs you can make for infantry at this moment in time. So if you were using somebody like Martel and you're going to be looking to upgrade from him, or you're still using Sun Tzu and you're looking to upgrade from him, I think this combination that you see on the screen here is probably the best you can do for 2 pairs of infantry, and that would be a really great thing to build toward. From our testing, we did not find that Guan Sargon to be as good as the Skippy Sargon. So I would say Guan Alex, Skippy Sargon would be the way to run that. At least at this moment in time, more testing will tell, more experience with them on the field will tell whether or not we would change that around a little bit. And I think if you're using 3 pairs of infantry, I mean, gosh, at that point, I'm not exactly sure what combination of things you're running to have 3 pairs of infantry already. Maybe it's something like this. I mean, yeah, you can definitely fit a Sargon into this lineup if this is like the 3 infantry pairs that you're using. And I think that would be an upgrade to the lineup. You could take either Pakal or Harold or CJ out of the mix and put Sargon in, and I think it would be better. Actually, if this is really what you were running, I would probably take out the Pakal. I would bring in Sargon. And I think Sargon really has to be with Skippy or CJ. So probably the way to do that is Harold with Skippy and Sargon with CJ. And that seems like a really strong configuration. I don't know if this is exactly the best pairings if you were doing 3 pairings, but it's just an example that if you had 3 pairs, I think Sargon is probably a slam dunk. 4 is certainly a slam dunk. If you are an infantry purist like Iris, and thank you again to Iris Den for doing the testing with us. I do really appreciate your sharing your expertise Sargon with everybody so that we can learn this sort of stuff. So the TLDR here is that if you have 2 or more infantry marches that you use in the open field, chances are very high that I think Sargon will be a great inclusion in your lineup. And if you're going to use Sargon, you're going to need some good talents. I plan to use Sargon on 2 accounts, by the way, my main and my restart. And if you're rallying, we'll find out the rally results later this week. But I think if you're rallying, you're probably going to be very happy with Sargon. So I think he will be really good for infantry. But this video is just about open field, not rallying. Okay? If we look here for open field builds for Sargon, you've got the infantry versatility and skill tree. I think this is a build you could use. It's a very classic combination for the infantry and skill builds. That said, because skill damage is so important, I would consider doing a clarity build. Clarity is right over here. After using an active skill, you increase your skill damage by 6% for the next 6 seconds. You do have to make some sacrifices to get that, but I think I would prefer this build to the full infantry build because I really want the boost to skill damage. And a lot of what's happening on this right side of the infantry tree is just boosting the march speed that you have and also reducing the march speed of the enemy. So making those very simple changes lets you actually pick up a huge amount of march speed. We can get 2 points over there. We get 2 points over here. We get 3 more points over here. And we can go, if we want, and get more stats. I like more stats. We can get defensive infantry. We can get health of infantry. And we can get 2 more points over here. I mean, this is a lot of stats and a boost to skill damage. I like this configuration. It's something you could consider if you wanted to run a build and you don't care as much about all these stats over here. I mean, they are pretty nice. I think march speed manipulation, though, is actually really important. So unlike other commanders, where I say, maybe you don't need the march speed, that first build I showed you gives you a passive chance to slow your enemy. And because Sargon desperately needs your enemy to stay close to you, I'm actually not so sure that this build, which I would normally prefer, is actually better. But there is a third build that I think we really need to talk about. I think this is actually the better build, and this is it over here. And the reason I like this build is that it just cranks the rage. And so much of Sargon's kit is about having your active skills be used. I mean, it's literally about getting more stacks of odd, which means you have to be doing skill damage, which means you need to generate rage. So I think this is probably the build I would use in the open field if I was using Sargon as the primary. And I think for the Sargon-Skippy combo, that's probably what I would do. I would use the Sargon as the primary, Skippy as the secondary, and I would use this build. The Skippy build is a little bit more tanky. You get more rage every time Rejuvenate triggers, because in the skill tree, it's double the amount of rage, weirdly enough. But I would probably, again, use this build for just the extra rage and getting your skills going faster. But there's always so many ways you can tweak a build. I mean, even this build, as I was saying, slowing is so important. I mean, if you wanted, you could cut a little bit of march speed here. You could cut a stat over here. You could get the passive slow on this march if you wanted. And I think more marches that have Snare of Thorns, the higher the chance that you end up slowing your enemy. I don't know. There's a pretty good chance that we're undervaluing the importance of these slows, especially the passive slows, in order to keep an enemy locked in with you. And even a commander like Honda Tadakatsu that is a 50% slow when you use an active skill is looking really, really good. And I should say that we haven't yet tested Honda Tadakatsu with Sargon the Great. And it could be that Honda and Sargon is actually really gangbusters, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case, because he's got a lot of march speed. So to bring this whole thing full circle, should you expertise Sargon the Great? I think that for most people that are just entering the Season of Conquest, there are some other commanders that are probably higher priority that we mentioned earlier. Nevsky, Boudica Prime, you've got Joan Prime, William, if you're running 2 cavalry marches. There are commanders that I think are higher priority. You should do those commanders first. And if you are an infantry purist, you're running multiple infantry marches, you wanted to prioritize Sargon, you could. But I think the thing that is going to be really deceptive for how well he actually performs in the field, compared to the tests where he's looking really strong at times, is that you're just not going to get the free damage of having your enemy just sit there and eat the full 2,500 damage factor. And if you're not doing the full damage factor, it's just not going to be as good as you would think. Now, if you just want to win duels, I mean, hey, Sargon Skippy is just looking nuts. Sargon CJ is looking really good. Guan was looking less impressive. I think he's probably fine, but less impressive than the other combos I just mentioned. Alexander the Great was also less impressive. We tried Harold, we tried Leo. I mean, we tried a lot of stuff, but you should watch the streams because they were, first of all, pretty entertaining, and you can see the results for yourself. You can see the equipment that was used. We talked about the talents in the stream as well. Cards will be in the end screen for the 2 streams where we reviewed these. And if you enjoyed this video, do me that huge favor of throwing a like on here and subscribing to the channel. We're going to have more awesome stuff coming soon where we expertise Tadak, which I'm very much looking forward to. We'll test him in a rally capacity this Saturday as soon as the Mightiest Governor ends. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies.